Hi, we get questions all the time about how much water you can add to the paint. So to start off, why are you adding water to the paint and what's it going to do? So adding water to the paint, you might be trying to either reduce the colour or you might be trying to reduce the viscosity. They're generally the two ways. The third one is to keep the paint wet. Each one of those points or reasons for adding water, there are generally mediums that you could use to mix in with the paint that are going to allow you to do a lot more of those things. For instance, the drying retarder. So there's no problems with adding a little bit of water, and we'll get to the ratios in a sec. There's no problems with adding a little bit of water to the paint, but to replace the water if you're painting on plein air or in a really hot environment, your studio is quite hot. So adding a little bit of water is not a problem to replace it. The issue is if you add too much water. So we'll talk about the mediums and things in a sec as we go on, but what's the problem with adding too much water? The big problem is that you reduce the binding side, the binder of the paint. That's the glue bit that sticks it down. Why is that a problem? When you go to put a subsequent layer over the top, normally the acrylics or all of the paints will dry water fast. In other words, they won't move. When you come and put another coat over the top though, and it's not water fast, or you've added too much water, we've got not enough binder in the ratio of the paint, you can lift the coat that you've already put down. Obviously that can be problematic. So to avoid having the paint water fast, firstly the ratio of water you add, about a maximum of 1 part water to 3 parts paint. The paint is generally, and it'll depend on which grade you're using, for instance, a Derivan Students, that's probably about as far as you want to go. The Derivan Matisse, the professional acrylic, you can maybe add a little bit more, and each colour will be slightly different. But that's a reasonably good ratio to stick with. Now, to achieve a really thin runny paint, rather than just adding straight water, if you take 1 part water and 1 part of a medium such as acrylic painting medium or polymer gloss varnish, mix those two together, you can use any ratio of that to the paint. Because you put binder in with the water, you could use 1 part paint to 9 parts of the mixture, and you'd still have the adhesion you need, but still be able to go, it'd be nice and thin and be able to go through an airbrush or dribble it around. If you're trying to reduce the colour, say you're taking a deep phthalo blue or ultra blue and you're wanting to get a nice light blue sky, a bit like a watercolor effect, the same thing applies. If you reduce the paint right out, you'll get that lovely light blue with, say, paper or the canvas showing through, but you might find that you can lift some of that blue because there's just not enough binder to hold it on. So once again, a mixture, as we've just described, of equal parts either polymer gloss varnish or acrylic painting medium and water, and use that to reduce down your paint, you'll have the perfect finish. Now, if you're finding the paints are drying too quickly, it's not a problem adding a little bit more water in. That's fine, but as we've discussed, you don't want to go adding too much. So you can look at other mediums like drying retarder and adding a little bit of that to the paint, and that will slow the drying time. So we keep talking about water and adding water to the paint. What sort of water? Obviously you want it to be the cleanest water possible. Most drinking water, unfortunately, is not quite as clean as we need. So using distilled water is your best bet. Now, you don't need to go and buy distilled water, at least you can make it. The reason you actually want clean water is, especially if you're going to keep this mix of paint and water for a while, and especially over summer, the bacteria that's in the water that's very standard in pretty well drinking water all around the world, will start, or potentially could start to grow in the paint, and it can go off. So clean water is essential. Really easy way to make it though is to take a pot, put it on the stove, have the water come to the boil for at least 3 minutes, so over 100 degrees obviously, for at least 3 minutes. An electric kettle won't do it. It doesn't get quite high enough and it doesn't go for long enough. So as I say, I think I've made the point, 3 minutes of a rolling boil, and that should kill pretty well anything nasty that's going to affect the paint. Obviously leave it to cool down before you add it to the paint. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you soon.